Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Asher Marketing Podcast. I'm Anthony Giuliano, and my guest this week is Josh Wickersham with Harris Boats. Josh, thanks for being here tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So you are a somewhat professional traveler, and 2020 was not the best year for that. So what do you have planned for 2021?
Oh, man. So last year we had a trip to Costa Rica planned. That shut down pretty much right when we were looking to go. So we ended up just rebooking it, and we actually already took that trip.
Oh, wow.
Last month.
Okay.
The next trip we don't really have on the books.
All right.
We've been, making a list and taking ideas. So if you got any suggestions, I'm open to it.
Well, I haven't been to nearly as many places as it appears you have been, but Australia was my favorite one. That was a big trip. Have you been there?
I have.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. See, I couldn't stump you there.
Australia, New Zealand, and Hawaii was one of my favorite trips we took as well.
Well, New Zealand and Hawaii are both on my wish list. I haven't been to either one. But no, I started traveling really late in life, and the Australia trip was only a few years ago, and that sort of changed the way I think about travel. I had a friend, a former coworker named Jeannie Otis, who when I came back from Australia, she said, you travel for three reasons. You travel to see people, you travel to relax, and you travel for adventure. And only late in life did I find out that I kind of like the travel for adventure. So I've got a lot of places left to see. Of all the places you've been, what are some of your favorites?
Oh, man. So New Zealand, I would put at the top of the list. The people were great. Food is pretty good.
Yeah.
And just the landscape is gorgeous. There's a reason they shot Lord of the Rings there.
Yeah, sure.
Everywhere you look, it's beautiful.
Sure. Anything in the U.S. that you would recommend that maybe people don't think about? Or is most of your travel international?
We started doing more U.S. travel. Back in college, my family took me on a road trip through like South Dakota, and then out over into Wyoming. And the Black Hills were gorgeous. It's not too far, maybe a day and a half drive if you spend the night. And there's a lot you can get to.
Yeah.
So basically anywhere, really.
Yeah.
I've not been somewhere that I'd be like, oh, I'd never go back there.
I'm kind of the same way. And I said that once and somebody challenged me. I was like, no, really, I'd go just about anywhere.
Yep.
I obviously want it to be safe, but I'm up for a little risk too. So what is now, I'm going to ask this question. It's completely selfish. I'm asking this for my own purposes. If anyone else benefits from it, great. But what are some like tips that you've learned as a traveler that you think people should know that maybe they don't know?
I've got a lot of friends who like to do, the resorts and they, do all-inclusive stuff, and that's not really our style. We like to do a lot of the Airbnb stuff. Before kids, we were doing a lot of the shared space.
Yeah.
So, you share a bathroom, share a kitchen with the host. It's a great way to really experience how people are living over there. You get a lot of local tips, like the best restaurants that may or may not be on TripAdvisor. And just, making sure you spend time doing the little things. And, it's about the journey and not necessarily the destination. So taking public transportation is a great way to kind of see what life's like somewhere else.
Yeah.
So just, I would say just get out of the resort.
Yeah.
Not that you can't do that. Those are great too, but
sure.
It's not everything.
Yeah. And one of the things I like about Airbnbs is actually when you stay in a neighborhood, it's different where you're not apart from everything. You're kind of in the mix, which comes with some challenges, but it's fun. It's a way to experience living in a place as much as just visiting it. So
yeah, we've definitely gotten lost a couple times looking for our apartment, but it all works out in the end.
Yeah. Well, we're not here to talk exclusively about travel because this is, of course, the Asher Marketing Podcast, not the Asher Travel Podcast, although maybe someday we'll do that. Who knows? But we want to talk about a few things that we typically discuss on this podcast, one being your career path, another being the organization you work for, and then some of the projects you're involved in. So let's start with career path. You mentioned before we hit record, grew up in Middlebury, went to Huntington University, studied film production. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
So tell us how you get from there to where you are today.
Yeah, so I kind of think of my career path as, one of those cartoon treasure maps where, you kind of start in one spot and then it does a bunch of loop-de-loops.
Yeah.
You don't know where you're going to end up, and then you finally land on the X where the treasure's buried. But I studied film production. My goal was originally to move to Chicago, worked with a production company over there. And I spent a few months couch surfing on weekends, interning at a studio. Never really landed a gig, and then got a job here in Fort Wayne at DeBrand Fine Chocolates, in their small marketing department.
Sure.
And I was working, half doing marketing stuff, social media, website, photography, and then half in the shop as a customer service employee. So it was kind of a mixed bag of experience. I got to work with the people and then also help sell the product, which was a lot of fun. And funny enough, that was one of my first experiences with travel. They licensed their name and their chocolates to a company in Kuwait for a while. And so I got to go over and help open a store over there. And that kind of, opened my eyes to, the bigger world out there. But and then from there, I got into digital marketing, a little heavier with, an ad agency as an account executive, and found out, that's not really my style, not my speed.
So as someone who's done, account side work for a while, I'm interested in what didn't work for you. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't work for me, but there's some of it that works, obviously, because I've been doing it for a while.
Yeah, I'm just not really very salesy.
Okay.
I enjoyed learning and sharing, everything that digital marketing can do and how it can help. Yeah. But when it came down to it, I wasn't, very good at, calling people up and saying, hey, we should try this or we should try that. If you ask me, I've got plenty of ideas, but it's just not really my attitude to go out there and do that.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So you go from the brand to a digital marketing role at an agency. You decide being an account exec is not for you. Then where do you go from there?
So from there, I kind of stepped back from full-time work and picked up some work at a photography studio, Robert's Photography here in town. I still work with Pat quite a bit. And I also worked at JW Specialties doing some of their social media, Facebook, email marketing. And during that time's when my wife and I started traveling a lot. I was able to set my own schedule, didn't really have any PTO, but I could work remote when possible. And then from there, we started a family, and I kind of figured out that, you need a little more consistent paychecks and, some benefits and stuff like that.
It changes everything, as I learned 21 years ago. Yes.
And that's what landed me at Brunswick with Harris Boats. So,
okay. So what was it? Was it a position that was advertised? Was it through someone you knew?
Yeah, it was. I think I found it on Indeed, and it was listed under Brunswick and not as Harris. So I wasn't really sure what it was, and even the job description didn't really mention the brands. And I went through the process, and then I realized that it's Harris Boats, which is. They've been making boats in Fort Wayne for over 60 years now. So very familiar with it. I spend my Sundays on a 1972 Harris. So once I found that out, I was like, oh, this is great. Yeah. And then they were looking for somebody specifically to come in and help with their photo shoots and video shoots. And I was like, oh, this is perfect. Okay. And so that's what brought me in. So
is the majority of the work you're doing on the photo video side, or is it broader than that?
I would say it's much broader. It's pretty seasonal. Right now, we're getting ready to jump into our photo shoots on the water. So it's a lot of prep work, pre-production, getting shot lists together, lining up talent, figuring out how we're going to get the boats to and from the lake, all that stuff. But over the summer, then I spend, several weeks between the factory and on the water. Yep. I come back looking like I've been at the beach, the whole time. Everybody's like, oh, Josh is back. So the summers are great. I love the summers. Once we get into the winter, it starts to slow down. Then the fall, we're really, trying to get our materials together for product launches, get ready for boat shows in the spring. And then, spring is heavy selling season, and then, we kind of start the cycle again. But I also do a lot of general customer service stuff, and I run our social media accounts and that kind of stuff year round. So there's not really a slow time. It's just kind of a different pace. Yeah.
So in terms of locations, do you generally work in Northern Indiana, or are you going to other locations to shoot?
The majority of the time we are in Northern Indiana. We go up to Lake James quite a bit. just because, we take a lot of boats to and from the lake and it can get expensive if you have to go too far.
Sure.
We do try to get out of northern Indiana just so the tree line doesn't look, the same everywhere you go. But that's usually, once every other year we get to take a boat or two.
Sure. So what are some of the challenges that people might not expect that you run into on a boat shoot? What are some things that, you've run into that maybe are not so fun in what sounds like a really fun job?
Yeah, it's one of those things where a lot of the times we're using boats that are, fresh off the line or, this is the first one we've built and we're putting it on the water the first time. So we've gotten up there and the fuel lines haven't been hooked up or something like that. And we're like on the phone, we're like, I can't figure it out. And this is all stuff that, would normally be taken care of by a dealership.
Sure.
But nobody's like, oh, they'll do it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay. We had that happen with our camera boat. We take this giant, 2-story tower boat with twin engines and we get it out on the water. There was just enough fuel to get it out into the water and then
not back.
Not back.
Yeah, that's a problem.
So it's a lot of little stuff like that.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about Brunswick and Harris, how the two entities are related and where you spend most of your time, which brands you're working on and what that consists of.
Sure. So Harris Pontoons was founded in 1957 over in LaGrange area, and we've been here ever since, manufacturing pontoons specifically. We did deck boats for a while, so there's a lot of Harris and K-Yacht deck boats still out on the water, but we're back to pontoons specifically. Brunswick purchased the company a few years back, and they kind of streamlined the process and said, we're gonna sell pontoons and we're gonna do it well. And Brunswick is a 100% marine focused company now.
Okay.
So they own Mercury, some of the other big brands like Sea Ray, Bayliner, and I spend most of my time with Harris. I do also work with Cypress K Pontoons, manufactured out of the same location. But the majority of my time is spent with Harris. So it's been fun because I know pontoons. Like I spend time on pontoons and I know what it's like to actually go out and use the product. So it's fun.
So you mentioned you spent a lot of Saturdays on a Harris pontoon. Was that true prior to you working for the brand, or was that a byproduct of you working for the company?
Well, so I married into that one.
Aha, okay.
Yeah, my wife's family has an old Harris pontoon.
That's
boat.
The best way to have a boat is to
not know
someone who has a boat. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, especially with small kids. I just wouldn't even have time to do anything with it.
Sure.
But so I was, we were spending our summers, on the water, on the boat, and it was just a happy coincidence.
Yeah, well, that's great. So obviously, again, based on what we talked about prior to hitting record, big boom time for boats because where people are restricted from doing other things, the opportunity to spend time close to home and maybe saving money because they're not traveling and doing other things. What's that looked like for your brand over the past 14 months?
Oh, man. Okay, so let's say back in March last year, everybody was so nervous. A lot of our dealers and, everybody in the industry in general was just like, oh man, this is going to be like 2008. Mm-hmm. Nobody's going to buy a boat.
Yeah.
A lot of uncertainty. And then that was just the complete opposite. Once people figured out, they weren't going to be able to go to concerts or go travel and do all this stuff, everybody's like, well, what can we do? And boats. They can go to the lake. They can take all their friends with them. They can just have fun outside.
Yeah.
And that has not slowed down at all.
Yeah.
And we don't really foresee that slowing down in the near future. So
people have learned that they like it, and they would like to do more of it. Yeah.
It's fun. Yeah. So, we're selling boats as fast as we can build them. So.
Okay. So any supply chain issues? I know a lot of industries are experiencing that. Is that happening to your brands?
Yeah, and that's not necessarily just our brands, the entire industry as well as the RV industry. We share a lot of suppliers, a lot of the same building techniques and any kind of manufacturing process that uses fabrics and stuff like that. There's been a huge constraint on that. So we're to a point where we're working through it and we know what we've got to do.
Sure.
But yeah, that was definitely a bit of a challenge that, the company's been working with.
Sure. So what, if anything, has changed, when you have a lot of demand? How does your marketing strategy, and maybe even some of the little stuff, how does it change during that time?
Yeah. So we're not trying as hard to find new customers.
They're finding you.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're not having a hard time doing that. So we're focusing a lot on our current customers and how can we make that experience of owning our boat better.
Yep.
Because we get a lot of repeat customers.
Sure.
So we're really working hard on generating brand loyalty and just creating a perfect experience, the moment they put the boat on the water to when they take it out.
Okay.
And then working on, generating content that is useful to them. A lot of tutorials for new boaters, activities that they can do with their grandkids, that kind of stuff. Just ways to use their boat that they may not be thinking of, or just teaching them how to be better boaters.
Sure. And I would assume that in today's environment, I could be wrong, but I would assume that a lot of that content is video because it does, so well from an engagement standpoint. Is that correct? And if so, is that helpful to you since you come from that background?
Yeah. So one of the challenges that we have being in northern Indiana is that we are stuck inside for a lot of the season. So we try to get as much video content as we can, during the summer when the boats are on the water. And yes, video plays an important role in that. And I wish we could do more of it. But knowing, that 2/3 of the year we're not able to be on the water with the boat makes it a little challenging. So what we're trying to do now is leverage, some of our dealers to help coach them to create content. Because, we're not directly selling the boats.
Sure.
So we've got to kind of train our sales people out in the field to kind of help us through that. But yeah, video definitely is something that I enjoy working on and is making a big difference in how we're presented, especially with this high demand.
Sure. And who is your target your target customer? Who is it that you primarily focus on, and why is that the focus?
Yeah, so we get a lot of older 50s, 60s people, and a lot of them are, previous boat owners. They may or may not have kids at home, empty nesters, or, they're starting to get their grandkids at the lake. So we get a lot of people who will trade in their speedboat and they'll pick up a pontoon because they know they can still go fast. But they can also take it slow and just hang out with the little ones.
Sure.
But yeah, so it's a lot of multi-generational kind of families, and we're starting to push more into the younger audience, especially this past year with everybody being stuck inside. Everybody's wanting to take, their time outside. So we're seeing a lot of younger, first-time boaters being drawn to the brand. So
sure. So you mentioned the seasonality of the business. So I want to talk now about some of the specific projects, and obviously don't share anything proprietary that you don't want to share, but what are some of the projects that are taking up your time now, or that you're looking forward to? Maybe things that are keeping you up at night, or that get you excited, or maybe a little bit of both.
Yeah, definitely the photo shoots. That's what we're, gearing up for right now. It's my favorite time of year. The month, which, we'll be on the water in about a month. This month is one of the most stressful, just getting everything lined up and making sure, boats are completed and they get up to the water and they're cleaned and gassed up, ready to go. As soon as we get on the water, it is great. I have, you show up and whatever happens, and you deal with it. And it's fun. That's when you start to get creative, and that's where the magic happens.
So how do you source talent, if you don't mind sharing that? Having done that in the past myself, sometimes it's using talent houses, sometimes it's relying on family and friends, depending on the nature of the shoot. I'm sure there's a lot of people who would love to be part of a shoot out on the water, but how do you find talent generally? Yeah,
so it's a good mix. A lot of times we'll use employees and their families. We know that they're, available during those hours. We usually shoot during the week because the lake gets pretty busy on the weekend. We get a lot of lake families that we've just kind of interacted with over the years. We know that they're natural on the boat.
Yep.
They're comfortable driving.
Yep.
We don't really have to do much coaching. They just look good on the boat.
Sure.
And then, for some of our bigger products, we'll hire talent in. For our photo shoots, or our video shoots, we usually hire talent from a modeling agency, knowing that we've got a lot more work to do and we need to be able to rely on them hitting their marks and all that stuff. So, yeah, it's a good mix. Yeah. I've had my friends, my family out as well. So,
yeah. Yeah. Well, it's sometimes you can borrow talent, but they're not always reliable if you, if you ask them to do it for nothing. Yeah. Well, or close to nothing.
Yep. So every year you'll see me in at least one boat because somebody didn't show up.
Yeah. The back of my head has been in probably 100 different photo shoots. I have the backside of my head is ready for prime time, not the front side.
Yeah. So. Well, there's a reason we're behind the camera.
That's right. 100%. 100%. So in terms of the boat shows, what's your involvement in that, and how does that come together? Obviously, that's been hard to come by in the last year, but as we get back into that, how does that affect your work and what's your involvement in it?
Yeah, so our department, we help organize all of the point of sale and like boat show displays and everything like that. A lot of it's handled by our dealerships. They're required are responsible for setting up the boats and getting them cleaned and ready to show. So we help with, getting any of the marketing materials together for them. And then we go and help as sales personnel. So I'll go to a couple shows. Our sales managers are at every show they possibly can be. Mm-hmm. We've got some other people from corporate that'll come over and help out, but we're mostly just kind of there to answer questions and help sell the boats for our dealerships.
Okay. All right. Well, anything there on the schedule or those starting? Obviously, it's a little bit past that season, I would think.
Yeah, last year, obviously, I don't know that we did any with any of our representatives. This year, it's a bit more of a mixed bag. A lot of them are able to have boat shows outside. Some of them are opting for in-house dealer shows rather than going to a big convention center. They'll host their own event. This year, we're starting to see some of these shows open up, and I expect we'll be at a bit more. Probably not 100%, but a lot more.
Sure. Well, Josh, I'm going to swing over to the speed round of the show where we talk about some of the things that we've discussed, but maybe a little bit of a different angle or a little more concisely. And I want to start with your career path. You've done some things and learned maybe this isn't for you. You've done some things that have aligned better with your interests. You've worked pre-kids. You're now working with a family. What are some of the things you've learned? Maybe your best advice if you were talking to, a student group at Huntington University or someone who's just getting started in marketing or someone who, isn't sure they're in the right career path and might be looking at something else. What's some of the best advice you've learned over the years?
I would say start with finding an industry and a company that you like. Mm-hmm. There's a big difference between selling something that somebody needs versus something that they want.
Yeah.
And if it's something that you enjoy doing yourself, that makes a huge difference. And not everybody's going to find that their first job.
Sure.
And if you don't, I would suggest finding either a hobby and trying to work that into something that you could potentially see yourself doing down the line, or finding a nonprofit locally that aligns with your interests.
Yeah, for sure.
So finding an industry that is interesting to you is probably the number one thing that I would start looking for.
Yeah. So if I want to go down a little bit of hopefully a productive digression,
sure.
You actually, your interest in travel was a personal one, but it also had some impact on your professional life.
Yeah, so I did recently start volunteering with Fort Wayne Sister Cities on their marketing department. I'm not spending as much time as I would like to at the moment, knowing that it's a busy season for us. But that's been a lot of fun for me to get to know the people involved there and start to kind of generate more awareness locally about what we do and, how we can impact, students who are going on exchange trips or just people looking to learn more about other cultures.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I admire about the path you've taken, and it's kind of emblematic of something that didn't exist when I started my career, is if there's not a path for you, you can create one. You can start a blog. You can start video content and position yourself as an expert, or at least someone who has an affinity for a particular industry. And sometimes that turns into a career, or at the very least, it helps complement a career. So
Yeah, definitely.
yeah. All right. Second question. If someone were to ask you about the place you work and you had to sum it up in a few sentences, 30 seconds, 60 seconds, what would you say?
We make pontoon boats and we have a lot of fun doing it. Yeah, I mean, if you enjoy hanging out with your friends on the water in the summer, I mean, that's basically Harris in a nutshell. We make good boats.
All right, great. So the last one might be easier for you than it has been for some people, because you're actually in an industry that's thrived during this time period. But, what have you learned over the past 14 or so months that you think will stick with you? Because, the last guest that I spoke with, we were talking about, some things changed and pushed forward things that were on the cusp anyway. And now it's just sort of everyday life that we're using them in terms of works, tools at work or ways of working. Any of that or anything else that you learned over the past 14 months that you think is now here to stay?
Yeah, I'm a lot more into my schedule. I make sure that I block out time if I know that I'm going to need to do something. I've been lucky enough to work remote throughout most of it, and I'm kind of hybrid right now, back and forth between home and the factory. And that can be challenging, trying to keep your work and life separate. So, and even during the workday, a lot of our employees are in a different state, different time zones. And so the lines between, who's available and who's not are pretty blurred. So I make sure to block my calendar and say I'm not available after 5 o'clock. If there's something that we need to do, we'll work on it. And then I also, make sure to, I close my laptop and I will turn off my notifications for specific hours during the day.
Yeah.
Because I know that it's just a little bit of anxiety that I don't necessarily need. It's easy to feel obligated to work when it's right there.
Yeah.
And people need to take a break.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's great advice. And we've learned over the past 14 months, if nothing else, that while work is important, it's not everything.
Yeah.
And we can, shut it down and things will continue to move on, either without us or will wait for us when we're ready to get back to work.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, if you ever need a model for one of your shoots, someone who can sit on a boat and eat and drink, I'm your guy. So keep me in mind.
All right. Yeah, we got plenty of waters in the cooler.
All right.
Just for you.
Yeah. Yes, that's my beverage of choice, of course. Well, Josh, thanks. Really appreciate hearing more about you and the company you work for and some of the stuff you're working on. Thanks to you, and thanks to everyone who took the opportunity to listen to this week's episode. We'll be back next week with another great guest, and we hope you will join us then.